what we're noticing with psychedelics is it can evoke a mystical experience in someone. And Johns Hopkins was able to create a questionnaire called the Mystical Experiences Questionnaire in association with taking a psychedelic substance and research. And what they found is the higher the level of the mystical experience, like, if you had a more profound experience, that actually correlated to you having a more positive, robust outcome, improvement of your mental health for a longer period of time. Hi, I'm Dr. Sarah Abedi. On EverForward Radio today, we talk about the physiology of healing, the physiology of mental health, how our bodies are telling us things that we can be listening to for healing, how there are new modern ways of approaching holistic health, and how psychedelics can be part of that.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to EverForward Radio. I am so excited to bring you Dr. Sarah Abedi. We're going to be diving into what I believe is a direction I'm so excited about, a direction that we really need for traditional care, allopathic care, but new integrative and holistic care. Some new, if you will. A lot of unique through lines in terms of mind, body, and soul to get you well and to keep you well, and even diving into really unique, deeper trauma areas beyond just wellness. So with that, Sarah, welcome. Did I get that
Thank
right?
you. Yes, you
okay,
nailed
cool.
it.
All right. I really need to get a teleprompter in here because I'm just like, say the smart words, Chase. But welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And I first connected with you via shout out Cortez and the whole crew at the Military Influencer Conference late last fall, I think it was, which is not what it sounds like. When I first found out about the Military Influencer Conference, I thought it was going to be a bunch of camo guys and girls running around taking selfies, like actual influencers. But no, it's a really cool thing. And, we're going to be talking a lot about the military here and military personnel, but not only. So people don't skip through the military part right now. Although I just noticed Joseph's wearing a camo as well. So he's on brand today. It's how can we as service members, while on active duty and as we transition back to civilian life, how can we have influence in our communities kind of in the same way that we did as military service members? That's my paraphrasing. Cortez might, school me on the actual definition, but bringing awareness to healing, especially bringing awareness to how really unique the military experience is through such potentially traumatic events that a lot of us, might witness or might see or feel or hear during service. It was kind of like at the crux of what I caught at your conversation, your panel. And as soon as I heard psychedelics and breath work and psychotherapy, mental health in conjunction with this community, it had all my attention. So what are you doing most in the world these days?
So I maybe I'll take a little step back and just say a little bit of the history and then what led me to psychedelics. So I went to medical school, did my residency in emergency medicine. I felt in my medical education, there's an aspect of acute care medicine, so emergency medicine, or Western medicine does that really well. And so I was really drawn to study that. And I was like, broken bones, heart attacks, I'm going to really feel like I'm helping someone deeply. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And what I realized is kind of in the people that were coming into the emergency room, it wasn't just emergency cases. There were a lot of chronic, mismanaged problems, including mental health issues. And there was an element where I was just like, I wonder if there's something we could be doing better. I would be seeing people come in very frequently, suicidal on 10 to 20 different pharmaceutical medications at times. And my question was, are we missing something? Are there any other treatments we can be offering them? And separately, I started realizing even in my training, for lack of a better word, I was a wounded healer in the sense of, for example, doing a 28-hour call. you're working in the hospital. There were moments where I was like, wow, I'm not eating, I'm not sleeping, I'm not taking care of my basic needs. And then I'm being asked to show up in complete service to another person.
Yeah.
And I think that the dynamics of like, I'm not doing okay. And then I'm supposed to be showing up and telling someone else like how to help you heal. Like that didn't feel right to me. And so once I finished my training, I actually had to take a step back because my physical health wasn't doing well. There were a lot of physical symptoms, skin issues, gut issues I had. And I actually did a lot of, conventional Western treatments. And I realized none of those were actually helping me. I was actually getting worse. I started having some weird, like neurological symptoms in my body.
Really?
Yeah. And I just immediately, reflexively, I was like, this must be X. This must be a neurodegenerative disease. And I later realized like my physical body was telling me like, you are not okay. You need to take a step back. And it was really through this completely integrative approach where I had to look at every aspect of my body that I finally grounded. I slowed down. I changed everything. I thought my nutrition was on par, but it wasn't. I had to change my exercise. I had to change how I was sleeping. Emergency medicine schedule. Like for me, like I couldn't do those night shifts anymore because they were really affecting everything with my gut microbiome and just like how I was sleeping, like that circadian rhythm dysfunction.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That was just not working for me. And so I started incorporating a lot of other integrative modalities, Ayurvedic principles, Chinese medicine, some functional medicine principles. For example, I had done some gut testing and I found that there was a wild amount of inflammation in my gut. And I had some skin issues and I was like, is there a correlation there? And we were never really talking about that, but I intuitively knew there has to be. If there's one aspect of my body that's massively inflamed, my skin is probably going to show it too. So I started using that as well and making those changes. And for the first time in my life, when I made those changes, that's when everything changed in my physical body. And then the next step of it was like, there's actually some things with your mental health that you haven't registered. And that came up too after physical body was addressed. So things a little bit like, you're kind of a perfectionist. You're kind of a people pleaser. Like some of these things happened, the way you were raised or culturally.
Were you recognizing these or were these being pointed out by others?
Great question. It's, I'm finding the healing journey. It's, I was seeking it. And I think I was really seeking to find a lot of this information, read as many books as I can, go to as much therapy as I can, cultivate as much of this as I can. So I was very actively looking for it. And I think it was only when I was actively asking these questions that I found this. But like all the 30-something years before that I was all these things, I mean, there was a block to receive that information. And it was affecting every way that I showed up, like why I chose the career I did, why I lived the way that I did. So when that stuff started becoming more clear, I was like, that's interesting. And then through that, that's actually when I started understanding a little bit more about psychedelics and how those treatment modalities are being used to address mental health issues. So psychedelics can be a little bit of a taboo subject. They have a little bit of a loaded history.
Not in this neck of the woods.
Okay, great.
That's my Virginia showing. I haven't said that phrase in a long time. Not in this show anymore, at least.
Good. Yeah. And I felt the same even in my early 20s when I would hear that. And I was just like, when I hear psychedelics, I was like, that's a drug. And in my mind, drugs are bad. All drugs are bad. And once I started, doing my own research and I actually wrote my thesis on like a psychedelic compound, I realized, I was like, some of these psychedelics, they are not physiologically addicting at all, and so
quite the contrary.
They're anti-addictive, and that's some of the studies that we're working on right now.
Used for getting off of addiction to other substances.
Exactly, which I'd love to talk about some of the studies that we're doing exactly on this subject. But once I started seeing the research in Johns Hopkins and NYU and UCSF, this was already amplifying the things that we have been using these medicines for thousands of years. So I'm sure we've maybe talked about this on the show before, but these medicines have been used by indigenous populations for healing for a very long time. in a ceremonial context. Now, we are researching in a little bit of a different way, but still trying to hold that intention and have some aspects of ceremony. But once I started seeing how these patients, with 1 to 2 doses of a psychedelic compound, whether it was psilocybin or another compound, were finding complete relief and remission. Not all of them, but some of them significantly relieved from their symptoms. I'm like, why are we not talking about this? Why are we not studying this more? And when I delved into
why did it take so long? Why did it take this long?
Yeah. And so that's when I shifted and I was like, this is now what I want to do. So I started doing more, I did more training in like psychedelic research in San Francisco at this program called CIIS. And then I started working as a facilitator with psychedelics. So
and what does that mean exactly?
yeah, so that means, the person that is administering the medicine in the research context. So the only way right now in the United States, a lot of these psychedelics we can use is through a clinical research context. The only legal psychedelic that we have, and some people might argue it's not a classical psychedelic, but it can have psychedelic-like effects, is ketamine. So that's what we use in the clinical setting, but in research, that's the other compounds. So MDMA, psilocybin, LSD, 5-MeO-DMT. Those are the things we're starting to research, in that context, because they still have a classification as a Schedule 1 drug. So Schedule 1 drug meaning no therapeutic potential, high abuse, like high chance of being abused by someone, which now we're starting to realize the research is showing that might be quite the opposite.
I don't want to get off on a tangent on that, but when
on a tangent.
when I hear that, when we look at objectively what has been marked as the criteria by our government, by the governing bodies that say this is safe and this is not safe, I get so, like, my blood boils when I look at the things that are in those categories, and like, how is alcohol not? And look, I enjoy a drink from time to time. My alcohol use has gone significantly down over the years, but no medical benefit whatsoever, no therapeutic benefit whatsoever, and addictive.
Yeah.
Like, how many people do we know? My hand is raised, have or are abusing alcohol.
Yes.
I abused the shit out of it for years by avoiding a lot of the work that we're going to talk about here. How is that not on that list?
Yeah.
But yet something that in one dose.
I know.
One dose.
Yeah.
It's like the equivalent of getting a beer.
Yeah.
And 80% of maybe your issues are resolved. Or you have clarity on what to do next. And you don't need to come back for another beer.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I find absolutely fascinating about this field, because as you were saying, we have been doing studies with addiction on this. So alcoholism, smoking cessation, even opioid abuse. 1 or 2 doses of these medicines we're finding can create remission in someone. So what is going on? This model is very different than the conventional psychiatric model that we have. And I'm not, pounding on those medicines. Those can be incredibly powerful and needed. Those can help stabilize a patient and are invaluable. But some patients do complain that instead of getting to the root of it, it's more numbing the symptom. It's more just suppressing it. Instead of getting to the actual problem, bringing it to the surface, processing it, which is really hard to do. And what we're now realizing is are the psychedelics allowing that to happen? We think so. So we're finding that there's a lot of material in the subconscious, unconscious that is very difficult to come to the surface. And these medicines may allow those things to come for that processing so that you can go back to that homeostasis, that inner healing intelligence. That's a huge concept in psychedelics, that we all have this ability, this inner healing intelligence. And so a lot of times when we give this medicine during the dosing day, during the medicine day, we're not doing talk therapy. They have headphones on, they have eye shades on, the headphones are playing really beautiful curated music, and we're just supporting that inner healing intelligence, because the insight that comes up is wild. And, I've been lucky enough to sit in some of the integration rooms, and integration is after you have your psychedelic experience, the next couple of days or weeks, you sit and you process what came up.
This is integration we're talking about, right?
Yeah. For like in these research settings. And, even for these alcohol studies, the insight is wild. And the insight is like, wow, this moment in time, which they may have never had a connection to, like this point in my time when I was this young, something happened, and then it led to a core belief, and then something happened, and then I started drinking. And then they're like, I saw that from a different perspective, and I don't have to drink anymore. That's really interesting to me.
Yeah. What you're talking about right there, I think for me, amongst many other things, but objectively, when I talk to anybody that has gone through recreational or clinical, any kind of psychedelic healing process, that is the biggest through line that I think makes the most sense to me as to why we're so quickly more able to confront these deep-rooted things and not be so pushed back or thrown off again by them, because we can look at them as, it's like I can look at a movie about my life, I can watch a movie about my life, or I can be asked to play the star role and reenact it. There's a totally different experience going on. So when I can look at my life, when I can look at these events, I can watch them. I don't have to relive them. I don't have to quite literally feel them again.
Oh, totally. I think there's a beauty about like rewriting the narrative, because most of the time when these traumas happen to us, like we remain a victim to them, and there's no way we can rewrite that story. And then the entire world becomes the stories we tell ourselves about the world. So when something happens at a young age and we don't feel safe, that is a deep core belief that the world is not safe. So you're really going to see the world in a way that's not safe, and actually probably pull things in that validate that worldview. Which
kind
is
of
really
write our own narrative along the way.
Yeah, exactly. And then another thing I actually find really interesting about addiction is sometimes I feel like, I'm not too interested in getting rid of the actual addiction. The addiction is a perfect coping mechanism for a very dysregulated nervous system. And so can we figure out what dysregulated that nervous system in the first place? What made that nervous system feel so unsafe? And that's what I also find really fascinating is, we have our nervous system, and then we have our very cognitive, later evolutionary built prefrontal cortex. In our prefrontal cortex, you can't think your way into safety. Your nervous system is the oldest part of your brain. It's hundreds of millions of years old. Its job is to detect threat. So that's why if we could think our way into safety, we wouldn't really be in this mental health pandemic that we have. And just understanding that ways to ground and heal the nervous system are very different. I notice, and a lot of patients do say this, like talk therapy, it works well, but it only gets me to an extent, because I cognitively, I'm hearing what you're saying. I hear this shouldn't affect me, but I don't feel it. And then with other modalities, and it's not just psychedelics, but other treatment modalities, you have to physically feel that safety in your body, that shift. And I do happen to hear with the psychedelics, there is that sense of I'm for the first time finally feeling everything I've been speaking about trying to get to, which again, so interesting.
As you were just talking about the feeling aspect, that got me in the feels. Because again, I can relate to so much what you're talking about. And I think for the listener, for the viewer, really, really mull this over. Maybe this is why you're not consistent with therapy. Maybe why you never go. Maybe why you don't think it's real. But here's what I know you will believe to be real. Any feeling you've had around feeling well, not feeling well, feeling pain, feeling love. There's a difference in knowing those feelings, a difference in knowing what that might look like, or the environment, or the words, or even, the look on our face. But when you feel it, that is what makes it real. Absolutely. And again, someone speaking from experience who for years and years, off and on in traditional therapy, talk therapy, doing personal development work, I could look at it and I could know this is what it's supposed to look like. I know this work is conducive towards the life that I want and the healing that I want. But there was just something holding me back. I couldn't get to the feeling until I used plant medicine, until I used psychedelic healing, until I used psilocybin, until I used ketamine in a psychotherapy setting. That made it real immediately. And I could then walk away from sessions maybe that I did on my own or telehealth or even with a provider in clinic, having the power of all that come together. But walking out of that clinic, walking out of that room, feeling what I always felt I was supposed to feel or wanted to feel, like there's no unknowing that.
Yeah, no, and that's what we're continuously seeing. So what I'm also finding interesting about psychedelics is, in what you were saying, reminded me of the work we do with psychedelics and end of life. So there is this, existential, obvious dread of dying right before death for a lot of people. And so there was a study done with terminally ill cancer patients, and they gave them psilocybin. And what was so interesting is they kind of said something very similar to what you said. They felt something so deeply, profoundly calming and loving and deep compassion and almost this sense of, whatever is going on right now it's just a temporary blip in my humanity. Yeah, and those are actually the exact words that were used. And that's what I keep seeing, like the most effective change is when people start feeling this. And this is what I'm talking about, maybe the disconnection between body and mind. And then, dare I say the word spirit? When I use the word spirit, anyone, you can take it in whatever context you want. Even if I would have used this word 10 years ago, I'd be like, what are you talking about, Sarah? But what we're noticing with psychedelics is it can evoke a mystical experience in someone. And Johns Hopkins was able to create a questionnaire called the Mystical Experiences Questionnaire in association with taking a psychedelic substance and research. And what they found is the higher the level of the mystical experience, like, if you had a more profound experience, that actually correlated to you having a more positive, robust outcome, improvement of your mental health for a longer period of time.
It's almost like the more you were unable to describe your experience using
the ineffable
words, ineffable using human words, it's like, oh yeah, that's more mystical.
Yeah. And so what are some of these patients saying about exactly what you're saying, that mystical experience or that feeling of like, I finally felt it? There's a sense of, we're not in this alone. We're in this together. There's a deep sense of interconnection. And when I think of interconnection, I think, again, it's kind of the mind, body, spirit. Everything inside of me is connected. We are connected, all of us together. We are connected to nature. Things that like I almost forgot, but like our physiology is like, no, this is who we are. We want to try to maybe divorce ourselves from it. Yeah. And think we're highly individualistic. And there's a beauty in that too. Don't get me wrong. But like we are highly connected people. And if we want to act as if we're not, that's when some of these,
that's when we truly get disconnected.
That's when we're getting disconnected.
From community and ourselves, I believe,
And, and I realized, like, even in there were times that I realized, even once I finished in residency, as an attending, like, I started noticing the disconnection. I had to disconnect to survive. And this is what I'm noticing for a lot of people, like, to survive in aspects of a toxic culture, you have to disconnect, like how many times do we want to diagnose a fish, but this fish is in a toxic, like, water sphere, and a lot of people feel like, no, this is my problem. There's something wrong with me. And I get it. There's like an egocentric thinking of, which happens in childhood, that like, this is all my issue. I'm not lovable. I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. But at the end of the day, I think it's so much more complicated than that. There's elements of, like, the expectations, exactly what we're saying about, like, being highly individual and not needing anybody else, or not needing that connection of community or nature or whatever it is, that I notice, even personally for me, profoundly disconnected me from my physiology. And so as soon as I started realizing that, and also what I just even see with my patients, the things that reconnect them back, that's when the healing starts. It starts with and that's the beauty of it. Healing is so nonlinear. It can sometimes start with this aha moment in their mental health, and they're like, wow, let me look at how I care for myself. I didn't even think I had value, so I wasn't eating well. My relationships were really affected. I wasn't sleeping well. And it's that beautiful ripple effect of, like, When you start on that healing journey, it's really nonlinear, but at the end of the day, you're getting a lot closer to who you actually are. Again, not the story of who you told yourself you were,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I believe you kind of described this already, but I want to ask directly, using your MD logical medical brain here, how would you define the feeling part of healing?
Yeah.
As clinically as possible, as medically as possible, to maybe kind of bring someone in a little bit closer who can't quite wrap their head around maybe the other aspects you were talking about.
Yes. Yeah, I'm trying to do that and I'm having a hard time.
Yeah, I know it's a tricky question. I was thinking about it.
But what's really interesting is like exactly that person that you're saying, that was me, probably right before I started medical school and was in my pre-medical training. So I get that. I know who that was. I'm trying to see how I can word it.
Like when we're feeling or maybe even not feeling. Like what is going on there? Is there something we can lean into?
Yeah. So I would say, I think a lot of this comes back to our nervous system. So our nervous system, you have, and I can very briefly go into, you have your sympathetic nervous system and your parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. This is what our ancestors used to get away from threat, and we still have it in our bodies.
Stimulus response.
Yeah, exactly. You're seeing a tiger in the savannah, and you are running. Your eyes widen, you get really focused. All of your energy and blood supply is being shunted to the things that are only going to keep you surviving. So, and it's great. You need it. And so then once you finish that threat, then you're supposed to shift back into a parasympathetic rest and relax, digest system. So that is, can be controlled. If anyone's heard of, your vagal nerve, that vagus nerve really is part of your sympathetic nervous system. And so what I'm noticing a lot in society is a lot of us are staying in this chronic fight or flight. So chronically in sympathetic nervous system. Now the things that we should be able to complete our stress response. So our ancestors, they ran away from whatever that threat was. Not only that running that they did, maybe the screaming, the tribal screaming, the excitement, that finished the stress response, and they are back into a parasympathetic nervous system. The constant stresses of our life now, even though we're not registering them, our nervous system is registering. That person cut me off in traffic. I just got a really nasty email from my boss. All these things are chronic.
We have micro stressors,
micro fight or flight, and we are not completing those stress responses. We are not shifting back into parasympathetic. Parasympathetic is where all the healing happens. So your sympathetic nervous system, there's not going to be that much energy thwarted to your immune system for regeneration. You're not going to be actually putting energy into digestion. That's not a priority. So if we're not shifting into this parasympathetic and we're in this constant state of flight or flight, that's when I see a lot of issues happening with the body. So that's why I think this body-mind connection is really important to acknowledge. Your physical body will be decimated if you are constantly releasing a ton of norepinephrine, cortisol, all these stress hormones that are really essential for the right period of time, but need to be brought back down to balance. And so I would say physiologically, that's what I think is going on when we are, just surviving in the city, surviving in day-to-day world. Think about even just social media. Like you're looking at it, you're like, wow, something awful. You just triggered fight or flight, And so that's what is so stimulating about looking at it, because like your fight or flight mechanism is super powerful. It wants to detect threat all the time. It doesn't really know that threat that's like 3,000 miles away.
It doesn't know what I'm looking at on my phone is not a real threat, but we're perceiving it to be.
Exactly. And that's the tricky part, is because that is a very ancient part of our brain. It's just really hardwired to be basic. Threat, and so when we stay in this state of fight or flight, I mean, your brain main priority is to keep you surviving, not to have you thrive. So it really takes more agency, more thinking, a different way of looking at it to be like, okay, I'm here, but we don't evolutionarily at this moment need to be here. In some places in the world, unfortunately, yes, you may have to stay in this fight or flight. But for the majority of us, our immediate safety is not in danger. And so we can be shifting and understanding just physiologically, wow, okay, I just had this thing. What are the things I need to do to regulate my nervous system? And this is what I find interesting about this holistic model is so much of healing is understanding how I regulate my nervous system, how I care for my body. Like, I want to say 90%, I mean, this is just me conjecturing, but like, there's so much we could be doing every day that is healthcare. You know, how we're eating, how we're sleeping, how we're showing up in relationship, understanding what our core beliefs are and our limiting beliefs, and that's why we show up. So that to me is a lot more interesting than going to my doctor once a year and thinking they are the ones that have the answers to my health. They're part of it. That's one part of it. But like, let's not give all our power to another person. Be like, you're in charge of my health. You know, this is a very that to me is a holistic model.
Beautiful explanation. Thank you. And again, as you're kind of walking us through the physiology of being in a state conducive to healing, mental and emotional health healing or not, it was just reminding me probably of why in my past I was not as successful as I wanted to be or felt I should be, because I'd be willing to bet anybody listening can relate. How often maybe do you feel like trying to heal, trying to do the work, trying to go to see a provider doesn't work because you don't want to? Yeah. And for me personally, I was doing the work because I thought it's what I was supposed to do. Yeah. Or I was in a relationship that was, I need to do this if I want to see if this relationship can work kind of thing. There's things coming up, and so there was like a semi-willingness, but in my heart of hearts, I was not ready. Yeah. I did not want to turn and face all of these things. Whereas why I think I've had such success in healing now the last 2.5, 3 years, I actually really wanted to. And think about when we show up to anything out of spite, out of you got to be here, out of someone told you to, you have micro stressors. Your walls are up to that experience, arguably, versus I came here because I wanted to be here. I want to fully commit to whatever is about to happen because I want whatever outcome to happen. I don't want to walk out the same person that came in. That is a totally different experience, totally different physiological experience.
Exactly. Yeah, I think you touched on a couple of really important things there. There is that feeling I notice with a lot of people, and I even felt that, where you feel stuck. You're like, I want to do this, but I can't. And you're not ready. You're not ready yet. There's a huge element of you have to be ready to do the work. Even with the psychedelics, like, it's never a magic bullet. You are walking in to do the really hard work. But that feeling of stuckness, to me, the way I look at it again, like, our brain is, again, trying to keep us safe, and it is using a lot of things to conserve energy. So a lot of, the core beliefs that we have found as really usually young in our life, this is how we see the world. And then this is how it's almost like your brain's, how do I use this? Like, this is how, something happens, stimulus, and then because of the core beliefs in our mind, this is the response. And so it's almost like what I notice when people feel stuck is our subconscious is the place where all these core beliefs exist, and this is how I'm operating from the world. And then when I start realizing, like, oh my God, my core belief of I'm a people pleaser and I'm a perfectionist and I do this because I equate being perfect with love, like, there's a space now to create a different response.
Wow.
And then so then you have your subconscious way of operating. And you're like, oh, I feel stuck. Why am I not operating from this place? Then you have an awareness. So you have this space to make a different decision. And then there's a conscious awareness here. Now, this space is exhausting because your brain is like, I want, this is habit. This is energy conservation. You do this, I do this. Like, I don't want to think about it.
Again, the physiological experience of what's going on.
No, exactly. Because it's at the end of the day, it's energy conservation.
And the brain is so selfish when it comes to energy.
Totally.
It wants the most results with the least amount of work.
Exactly. So then I think when patients start realizing that, like, this has nothing to do with me. This is just how my physiology is, you know, like cut me some slack. Like, let's be a little bit more compassionate about this. Yeah. And then knowing that, like, now that you have the space to make a different decision, maybe the first 10 times you're not going to do it, but at least now there's a space to know a different choice can be made. And I think that is everything. And then once you have this, you're like, you are so much more consciously aware of everything else about, wait, why do I show up like this? Why am I doing this job? Why am I in this relationship? Like, it makes you question the things you need to. But if you are not in the space, let's say you are in chronic state, fight or flight, you are exhausted, you're barely making your ends meet, you know, you don't have the bandwidth maybe, or I mean, there could be many reasons why you're just not able to show up, because the work is work. It's not just, you know, so, I mean, I totally understand. It's you're going to have to really need.
You need to. You almost not even like not only need to agree with that, but you have to like truly want it. You have to want it as much as you've wanted anything else for it to stick.
And I usually find that the want it, I mean, at least for me, comes from pain. And it comes from suffering.
I don't want to feel this way anymore.
No, I know.
I want something else. Yeah.
And that's what I find brilliant about the body and brilliant about all these other symptoms, is they're all trying to tell me something. You know, my intense anxiety and my, like, because I remember, you know, there'd be times where I'd notice, like, even I would be working in urgent care. So I theoretically shouldn't be stressed. This wasn't the emergency room. And I was like, I can handle this. And I realized my jaws were trembling and I was very jolty. And I was like, wow, my nervous system is dysregulated. Like, that's one sign of a dysregulated nervous system. And I was like, this is such interesting information. My body is trying to tell me something's not okay.
Just being in this environment is making you change like that.
Maybe that, and maybe just like, you know,
what you were bringing into that environment, maybe.
Yeah, maybe a lot of unresolved stuff was still following me, and it was making it so uncomfortable that I can either listen and make some changes, because that's exactly why your body makes these things in the first place. Makes you so uncomfortable that you listen and that you course correct and shift to a place that's more aligned with you, or I numb and suppress them, which sometimes you have to, because you got to survive, you got to get to the next day. But knowing that's not, in my eyes, a long-term strategy, that's a short-term strategy. Use it, regulate temporarily in this way, but then like ask your body, why are you making me feel so anxious? Why do I feel so depressed? What is off? You know, there's always like the wisdom of the body to me. Like, once you now know your body's an ally, like, I don't have to fight with you. Like, I love you. You're trying to tell me things that I can't intuitively register yet. Oh my God, that's amazing. It
is. And it's so, it's more than helpful. It's, you know, I'm just thinking of, like, you're not alone. You're not alone in that situation. There are so many people, and I've been there, where you go to your place of work, you go to your home, you go visit family, you go to a place, you go to certain people, and it just automatically puts you on edge. And here, I think, is another opportunity for some unique work. Is a lot of times we think about the other people, we think about the other place. I only feel this way when I'm here. I only feel this way when I'm around you. Now that might be true, but your body is giving you a feeling. It's not throwing out a hint card to the other place or the other person. Hey, careful, Sarah and Chase are coming. Last time, you know, we didn't feel so good, so let's change you. No, it's giving us these early warning signals.
Exactly.
This phrase I love, that, you know, our body whispers things to us all the time, and if we don't listen, it will scream.
Oh yeah.
So pay attention to the whispers before they turn into a scream, such as gut health, skin issues, stress, weight loss, weight gain, all these things. This is the opportunity to like check in with yourself and regulate yourself, because that's the only thing we can really change.
You couldn't have said that like better. I feel like, you know, so much of what I had to ignore for a long time was my intuition, you know, like that. Sometimes, I don't know, in this culture, is it valued as much as it should be? No. And now that even when I started listening to the intuition of my body, like the first couple of times it was really messy and I was wrong. You know, I was like, is this intuition? And then like it was or it wasn't. I'm like, oh no, that was fear. But the more I like listened to it and I followed it, and now that it's strengthened and like just in a place that I've never had it be before, it is such a guiding light and to use my intuition with my intellect together. Oh my God. Because before all I was using, it was so cerebral.
It's like a cheat code for life.
Yeah. And I think intellectualizing is also a coping mechanism. So a lot of people know everything. They're super smart, but it is kind of a defense mechanism. And I had that as well. And I just, I resonate so deeply with that. Like, that's what didn't make sense to me, and again, sometimes we need pharmaceuticals. I'm not saying we can, there is absolutely a space for them, but that is not the only answer. If someone is coming into my office, they have high blood pressure, they have, all the high blood, the first thing that could be a sign of a dysregulated nervous system. You're in a sympathetic state all the time. What are you eating? How are you living? How are you sleeping? All of those things alone, if you really look at them.
That's not a one-off of
it's not a one-off. Let me put you on this medicine for the rest of your life, like a blood pressure medicine. And then maybe you'll need that if we've tried and exhausted everything else. But to me, that high blood pressure can be a clue. It can be, or it can just be, you need to go on that blood pressure medication. But let's look at it more holistically. It doesn't make sense, at least in my eyes, intuitively to be like, cookie cutter, this is the answer for everybody. We need to look at the individual. Everybody has their own blueprint, what got them there, what's going on in their life. Have it be a mirror to show them, what are you seeing? That to me is a healer, a doctor, that can show you everything that's going on in your life, what's in alignment, what's not, and then you are your best healer. Let me remind you of that, I'm not the one doing the healing for you. I'm going to give you all the tools that I can think of. And then you are going to be like, that resonates really well with me. That intuitively feels good. Or no, I got to course correct that. And I hope that's what we're moving towards,
And I believe you are, quite literally you, because I know in the work that you do, I was sharing with you earlier, I kind of view it as the new holistic model, the new integrative model. And for me, and I think for a lot of people, when we kind of first become aware of how else can I feel better, there has to be another or a different way other than just waiting to get sick, going to the doctor and getting some pills. For me, it looked like, let me go get acupuncture. Let me try acupuncture, I should say. Let me try chiropractic care. Let me try massage therapy. Let me try going green. Let me try all these things. But what I see you doing and integrating is such thing as like a sound bath, as meditation, as psychotherapy, as we've already talked about, psychedelic medicine. Why these modalities? Why now? And do you feel like these have always been here and we've just been missing the mark? Or are there truly new, unique models, practices to integrative healing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of the framework of especially the psychedelic or holistic models have been around for thousands of years. When you look at Ayurveda, they acknowledge mind, body, and spirit. Traditional Chinese medicine, there's an acknowledgement that there's a lot, not just your physical body. Like, I'm not going to get lab work and purely look at that and not look at you as a whole person. You're looking at the chi, the energy. We don't have, I think in Western medicine, that concept of chi or prana or like that life force. And so I wonder what that kind of disservice can do. I think there's an incredible strength about evidence-based medicine. That's our gold standard when we do double-blind, placebo-controlled trials. I think that is one way and a very strong way to look at things. But then there's also other ways to look at things. And I think it should be a combination. I don't think it's ever one or the other. We're stronger together. And so the reason why I like all these other modalities that you had mentioned is, let's say we use psychedelics. There's something that happens. Areas of your brain connect to other areas of your brain that never have after you do psychedelic.
Neural crosstalk.
Yeah, neural crosstalk. Yeah. There's increased neuroplasticity. You are growing new neurons. And so what I want is, we don't want to water the weeds. We want to create new habits, new pathways, new ways to regulate your nervous system, to care for your body. Because, and there's a field that I'm so glad is gaining more traction, nutritional psychiatry. You are what you eat, you are what you absorb. to think that what we like, if we're
metabolic
not
health
eating,
and metabolic illness are going so hand in hand right now. Recently had on Dr. Chris Palmer from the Brain Energy, and just blow my mind.
Yeah.
Just what we're finding to be irrefutable evidence as to what's going on with mental illness to what you're talking about, nutrition.
What we're eating. And just what, like, we think this is food, but it's not. It's like a food-like substance. You know, like there's just not any nutritional value. These are not whole foods, like nutrient dense, you know, and this, our brain is mostly fat. We need to, you know, especially like this demonizing fat that we did, you know, a few decades ago. The research is now showing that research was flawed, you know, that we shifted from like good quality fat. Your brain is fat, you know, like if you're not eating, you know, nuts or wild caught fish or, like avocado or things like this, like those are essential for brain health. And so that is one pillar, that, you know, like how you're sleeping, you know, meditation. It's what's so interesting to me about meditation is before it used to be fringe. It was woo-woo like many decades ago. But anecdotally, they had been using it for thousands of years. And when you ask them, like, why do you do this? They're like, because we know it works. Now, again, I'm not saying that like if there's not a role for evidence-based medicine. I love evidence-based medicine because it actually shows us what these indigenous practitioners inherently knew in their body, probably intuitively knew.
So we're finally getting a scientific explanation for the woo-woo stuff all along.
But what if we can have a little bit of an open mind instead of being like, I'm going to be such a skeptic? Can we just be a little bit more just open, you know? And then also realize, like, why am I so dogmatically skeptical? Why can't I be a little bit more open-minded? What affects my identity when I'm, you know, because I just...
Why am I digging my heels into this?
Why am I so angry?
Meditation's never done anything to me. Like,
no, exactly.
Why do I shit on it all the time?
Yeah, and so I just think just having a little bit more openness, because I wasn't. And I remember what I felt when I had that really closed-minded, super skeptical brain. When I reflect on who that person was, she wasn't really happy. You know, she wasn't really open. She wasn't really connected to learning. Like the thing I always say is like, change my mind. I'm not married to any one way of thinking.
Love that.
And if someone is so dogmatically like, I'm just like, why? You know, and then it comes back to, you know, getting clear on like our identities are not who we actually are. Like my credentials or my name or where I grew up, like, that's not who I am, but that's a lot of times who we think we are. And so if someone is...
others tell us we are.
Exactly. And so if someone is telling me, the doctor, like, oh, let me tell you about something you don't know, is that triggering something in me? Because I'm like, no, I'm the authority here. Like, it's just like, let's ask those questions. Like, why did it trigger me in the first place? You know, like, if I really want someone to get better and there's this treatment modality, I want to be open-minded to change my mind, you know?
I want to pose something to the listener, to you, that this is why I love sitting down with people like you and expanding on areas of healing and wellness and moving forward in life, because this isn't just for no reason. Like it is because something has happened in my life and my journey that has triggered a curiosity to now I get to sit down with, you know, experts like yourself. So again, thank you. But the aspect of being closed-minded, if I'm getting very real and honest with myself, and I would encourage the listener, the viewer, to do this right now as well, pick one area of your life that you feel you are closed-minded in, or someone is telling you you're closed-minded. Who closed that lid? Who closed that container? Who closed your mind to thinking anything other than what you currently do? When I posed that question to myself and I couldn't answer it, or more specifically, I should say, the answer was not unequivocally, obviously me, meaning I didn't know why I believed this or did not believe that. Like, what kind of life was I living? Chase, why do you think that? Because it's what I've always done. Why? Why do you believe that? Why do you not believe that? And when I began to realize how much of my life I was living or not living based on closing the container because someone else told me to, or just collectively, maybe they didn't directly tell me, but because of my environment, because of my family, because of religion, because of community, because of not wanting to be outcast, because of not wanting to be anything other than accepted, I closed the lid on myself. Yes. Now here's the opportunity to ask again. Yeah. Why did you close that container? Are you willing to open it? Are you willing to just think about opening it? Yeah. It doesn't have to be a wholehearted jump in. It can just be, and like you said, introducing that space again.
Yeah. Oh my God. I love you. You worded that so well. I feel like, I think the reason why a lot of us, and I resonate so much with what you said, do that is because we want to stay connected. We want to have approval, but to what extent, to what cost? Because I think at the end of the day, we sell out our own authenticity. We're not true to our own intuition. And a lot of that can be modeled, in the family unit or in schools where this is what has been done for generations, not really acknowledging the health of an individual, everyone toxically coming in together in a family unit. And that's the beauty when you start shedding these layers to be like, where did this come from? Whose belief is this? Because this isn't mine, And then when I question it, I'm like,
careful when you tug on that thread, though.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And that's the part. I know that's the part of when healing is really nonlinear. There's this beautiful graph that shows you're here and then you want to be up here, and then this healing line is just super crisscrossed and because it's there were points on my healing journey where I did pull on that, and I was just wow, the foundation of who I thought I was, that's not even who I am. Yeah. That's a story that someone told me from this. And then that's when I was just man, this goes far. This is the opportunity to intergenerationally look at the trauma.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And how beautiful is it that maybe some of these things can be healed with me, and if I continue my lineage, what a gift to now have some of that stop with me. And of course they're going to have their own stuff, but reflecting, this is the beauty about as we grow, being able to have access to things that, my parents couldn't, because they were immigrants. They came from Iran. There were many times where they were in fight or flight. They were barely surviving. And there was so many things that had to happen like that, and then what can I take from that and just make it a little bit better and heal a little bit of, even sometimes in Persian culture, there's so much beauty. And then there's some things where I'm some of the Taro, to me, is that where my people-pleasing came from?
God, drives me crazy.
So how do we explain Taro to your listeners? How would you explain it?
The most, I'm going to get flack for this. All right. It is polite, but in my opinion, it is the most waste of time. It's just bro, I got it. Let me get it. It's we're going to go out to dinner and the bill comes I got it. Then you're going to know I got it. And then we literally, I have witnessed this at Persian restaurants. Yeah. Grown men stand up and act like they're going to fist fight over who's going to pay the bill. Yes. It's just back and forth. I've counted it. I think the magic number is it's between 7 and 9. Yeah. Whoever gets the 7th or 9th Taro, okay, fine, I give up.
And then that will kind of, you'll see that in other things, let me drive you to the airport right now, even though I'm exhausted. Let me go do this for you. And
let me let you know how much of a pain in the ass this is, but I will do it for you.
No, totally. And so there's something really beautiful about it. But then if you kind of dig into the psychology of it, I noticed this in myself where I would show up in complete service. I was taroing to people, and I was exhausted. I hadn't slept. I needed to eat that day. I did not need to go do the Taro thing that I did. And it was in that moment where I was okay, yeah, that's me as being as a people pleaser. And then when I set a boundary, it was extremely uncomfortable. But then that's when I was just oh my God, I'm honoring me. I'm listening to my needs for the first time. And it's something as silly as that, but when you deconstruct it and you're just something so cute as Taro, it can have a dark side. Yeah.
Just let him pay the bill. I'll get the next one.
It's so easy.
But this actually brings up a really interesting point. I did want to kind of get into the cultural dynamics that you have, that a lot of us now have. We're a very evolved society. I think I'm in a interracial. Different religion relationship, and I think a lot of people listening can relate. Yeah. There's a lot of this cultural stuff that comes to the table, that our physiology, that our mental health absolutely is going to have some resistance to.
Yeah.
A couple little sidebars here. Really the biggest thing in my relationship early on that my wife always gave me like, it's okay, like here's your out card, was about the family dynamic.
Yeah.
She's like, look, I know you love the food. Objectively, it's the best food, but that's only going to keep you happy for so long. Persian culture is a lot.
Yeah.
And someone like myself who is just plain white, just I'm Cephid AF, all right? Just through and through, but I'm caramel on the inside now. It did stand out a lot to me because, and I want to get to a really beautiful story here with this, is that it was a mirror to, like this gets me emotional. It was a mirror to what I didn't have in my own life. It was a mirror to the family dynamic that I didn't have, that I was craving so intensely, rooted deeply, based heavily in the loss of my father, because my father was the glue. And when my father was alive, everybody was happy. Everybody was together. We always knew when we were seeing each other and all this. And not only just my family, but our community. He was like the guy. And when he passed away, in many, many ways, that went away. And despite my efforts to try to fill that role, even though nobody asked me to, I recognized that she had that aspect, even though it didn't always come in the most convenient packages. She had that, and I didn't. And that wall, that stressor, that area of issue in our relationship completely dissolved my very first time ever using MDMA.
Wow.
I had this kind of realization that we had just come from this Taro favor thing with her brother, and it was the same kind of thing that always popped up with him, and it was just a huge inconvenience. I'm like, why do you always just at the drop of a dime just cater to him and to your family? And just literally he's always moving. I don't want to move him every like 6 months. It's a pain in my ass, and it's, hey, you'll come over now. And she would do it. And I just didn't get it. And what I didn't get was, oh, you have people that care about you. You have people that are local. You have people that you can call on to like do the inconvenient parts of life, but you have somebody to do it with. And that always just stood out to me as like what I don't have anymore. And ever since I had that realization, I was just like, he's just a brother looking for help from his sister. These are just family members looking to connect with their family members. And of course, that's not going to be beautiful and perfect all the time. But you know what? When we get together, it's beautiful and amazing and perfect. And like that happened, and I like broke down in front of her, and I apologized, and it's been like 3 years, and it's never come up again.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I just think that's the beauty of relationship, is that there's no one that is going to be showing you your mirrors more intensely. And when you are in a safe relationship and you know whatever this material is coming up is something I need to see, because this person isn't trying to mess with me. They just want the best for me. So like, it's such a safe place for this vulnerability to happen. I mean, this is what I find so beautiful is like
my physiology changed. My stress dropped, everything. To your point.
Like vulnerability is where we heal, and it is so hard for us to be vulnerable because maybe that's the expectation of society, especially for men. I just think it is so unfair. The expectation we have of men, I feel so much sadness, and I really hope that we can change this, because I mean, exactly what you just shared, there was a moment of deep vulnerability that sometimes is so hard to get to. That's why we need the MDMA. The MDMA does allow us to access those traumatic parts of ourselves in a way that's not re-traumatizing. And so bless the MDMA for that, or if you don't necessarily need that, to be able to bring this up. But whatever it is, how interesting, like something that like, bothered you so much about this had so much weight. And this is what I find so interesting. I was walking around
blind to it.
Yeah, exactly.
I had no idea. Yeah.
And so what I find when we're triggered by something, it's usually something in ourselves we don't want to see. but we never take it that next step. We're always like, oh no, it's you. Like, get out of my life. You're the ones causing this. But like when you just take a step back, and it's hard, again, you're just like, but what is this trigger? Now, whenever I'm triggered, I'm like, wow, what information is this trying to tell me?
Yeah.
And it's
Bring
always invaluable because I'm like, I had no access to that. Just like you were saying, you had no access to that. That's so fascinating.
And it even gets even more wild when I realize, and I think a lot of us, when we do this work, we get to a common realization that a lot of this is our own self.
Yes.
The expectation was imposed by me.
Yeah.
No, again, like I said, no one asked me to step into my father's shoes.
Yeah.
No one asked me to try to be the glue in our family or community. I was just modeling what I had seen my entire life. And I saw that as love, and I saw that as acceptance, and I saw that as, I would even say, the right thing to do. So why wouldn't I want to act out of love? Why wouldn't I want to act out of acceptance and the right thing to do? But again, I just made all that up based on, learned behaviors.
Yeah. No, and then when you find out, like when you understand, or like for me, like how much of my worldview, my core beliefs are not my partner's. And I'm like, how do you not see what I see? Like, this is crazy. How are you not understanding exactly what's going on in my mind? Because in my mind, I'm like, this is reality, and it feels so like, this is it. But that's the beauty, the flexibility, the mirroring, the vulnerability, and the growth,
Where do you think now, maybe you're seeing this in practice, in your clinic, in research, or just objectively kind of, looking out, blanket statement here in society, where do you see maybe our physiology, it's been, the body, the human experience has been kind of the through line thus far. Where do you see an area in our physiology, an area of our living, just daily being, that is of big concern to you, that you think, majority statement here, could be radically made better by focusing on maybe not the obvious, maybe not the physiology, but the mental health aspect or the inner work here we've been talking about?
Immediately when you said that, there's something that just comes up for me. I don't even know if I'm going to answer the question right, but there's something about people feeling that there's something wrong with them. Whereas what I would like to at least invite a curiosity is, what if there's something wrong with the environment? What if there's something wrong with this, because, what am I seeing a lot of? I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough, and there's a lot of really beautiful people in this work that are like, does a tree ever question if it's good enough? Does the sun ever question, like things where you're just like.
Sorry, did you ever see Everything Everywhere All at Once?
Yeah.
The most perfect movie I've ever seen in my life. Everybody stop right now, go watch this movie. The rock scene, when they're rocks and they're questioning, like, what are we doing? Like, oh, you don't have to worry about that here. Just be a rock.
Yes.
Like, I laugh cried on the plane when I saw that.
And something so ridiculously simple, but like, how much of it are we complicating, and who's complicating it? Like this expectation of what we're supposed to be as humans, how much we're supposed to work. Like when we don't work, even when I don't work, and I'm like, God, I just feel really lazy. I don't really feel like, what a waste of a day. Like that conditioning is so deeply ingrained. And when I sometimes look at other cultures that might not have this way of thinking, like their identity is not inextricably linked to their work. Like they just know, no, I'm a human and I have the right to go and relax and and just go and be with my family. And I just think that's so interesting to me, even just objectively, just reflect on like how hostile the inner landscape is of like, this is what I need to do. I'm not good enough if I do this. And I still grapple with that now, as much work as I do. So I'm just like,
here's the thing, Sarah, like that's okay. And we're human and that's never going to fully go away. I know you know that, but just whenever I hear things that I'm working on, a reminder that like, oh, this is the human experience.
Oh, yes.
Goes a long way.
Oh gosh, yes. Yeah. And just having compassion for that part of it, like
give yourself more grace.
Gentle. Because I think we're all doing the best we can. I think the more I'm in this space, do this work, it is impossible for me to judge someone because I'm like, with the best that they have available with their human mind, that's what they're doing, and it's like, if we can at least be of help or offer more tools, like, but I can't judge you, like I like that judgment part of it, it just can't register to me anymore. And it just is such an easier way to live, because I'm just like, your human experience is so different than mine. I just have a lot to compassion for probably the level of suffering that must be happening if you're exhibiting X, Y, and Z behavior, you know? But to me, that part of it where it's like, what can we question about the norms that we've just felt they are what they are, you know, like, you know, and even like for me, like, you know, that 28-hour call in medical school, you know, like, I want to question that. I don't think that's okay. I think we should, and there's so many other things that if we don't question it, and if we're just like, you know, status quo, the leaders know better, let's just have that. There's a lot of invisible forces that once we're like, let's bring them all to the surface and be like, what are them? Like, who's deciding these things? Like, what are the determinants? What are the metrics? Because they're not working for us. Like, America, hands down, there's no other country that has more of a mental health issue.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and we're the richest country in the world. So it's just like, let's ask some questions. I don't know the answers to them, but I do know that I think we're making it a lot more complicated than it is. A lot of our bodies have an incredible ability to heal. So
that's all it wants.
Yes.
It just wants to be in homeostasis all the time.
Yes, and it's brilliant. So it's like, what if they're really simple ways? Because like, you as a human being wouldn't have evolved unless there were tools to regulate the trauma, you know, to eat well, to heal the body, you know. And so, and you know, maybe some of those are so simple and there's not a business model around them, and that could be, but so it's just like, all I'm saying is let's let that curiosity come in. I don't have the answers, and if anyone is like, this is the answer, I would just be like, have a little bit of skepticism.
Question their answer.
You know?
Yeah. That's such a beautiful statement, and it's a solidification for me as well for a lot of the things I shared with you. You know, questions don't automatically mean, I think we jump to the conclusion that they automatically mean challenge.
Yeah.
If I question something, that means I'm challenging it.
Yeah.
No,
a threat to your identity.
Exactly.
No.
Yeah. It can be a confirmation.
Yeah.
It can be just, this needs to just be a question for a while.
A dear friend of mine, I believe his mentor would say this to him: the quality of your questions determines the quality of your answers. And when I heard that, I was like, like, we're not asking good questions, you know, and maybe some of the things that we're trying to solve, the question that we're trying to solve isn't even the right question. It's so much deeper than that.
I was recently on a podcast, another show, shout out Cody McBroom, and he was kind of breaking down, it was more kind of like the habits and like what is your wellness routine, and like how do you kind of challenge things both physically, mentally, emotionally. And I was like, it's perfect timing. I'm kind of for some work on a book I'm working on. Nice. I wrote down these rules that I live by, kind of breaking down what it means to live a life ever forward. Number one, well, it's kind of like Fight Club. First rule is there are no rules, or that kind of thing. But it's rules only exist to provide you with a starting point of what to question first. Question everything. Find which ones are temporary, which ones you still feel aligned with, and which ones you didn't even know you were following.
Wow.
If I could cut out, and I've got pages of other ones, everything else, I think that would be the one to just keep.
Oh, I love
for myself and for everyone else.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Oh my.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the beauty of life for me is like, you know, I did all the things right, you know, like in my mind, in my like worldview, you know, like I went to med school and whatever, all these things. And then, you know, like when I finished my training. I'm sure you made your Persian
parents very happy with that.
What's really interesting is my Persian parents were like, don't go. My mom was like, no, don't do it.
Oh, really?
Like, I love you, Persian mom. Yeah, no, I love my mom. She's amazing. But when I finished that, and I think when I reflect back, I think it was the perfectionism, you know, like I was valedictorian candidate. I was like, never had a B in my life. And so much of that was like, when I'm perfect, that's like what I equated to love, you know? And it was actually a story I told myself. My parents actually, they loved me unconditionally. I don't even think I like registered how much that was the case. But But so I did all these things, and even when I like graduated and I became an attending and I was working, I was like, God, why do I feel a void? And a lot of people feel this, where they do quote unquote all the right things, and who says those are the right things? Like those are the things we're questioning. Like once I started actually healing, then because I had the bandwidth, I couldn't do this in medical school or residency because I probably would have dropped out. Started healing, and then figured out who I actually am. And then aligning all those things, like that, I think is the most beautiful gift of life.
Yeah.
None of it is what I thought it was. And then when you show up in full authenticity, that's the best gift you can give the world. It's usually not who you thought you were. And like, what better thing to dedicate your life, this limited time we have, is to get more aligned and then have that be the thing that you put out in the world.
I want to bring up some notes that I had actually from, as we're recording this episode that went live today with Benjamin and Azria Becker. And then when I get to my final question with you, I think it's so perfect. We've been talking about feeling quite literally in a unexplicable state, but also the feelings we have in the body, the physiological state. And nervous system, and I have notes from my episode with them that I want to kind of wrap up this conversation with to be what I think would be the most ultimate goal for anybody. And it's talking about how to bring a full circle here, as you discover a version of yourself that is deeply solid but is never rigid, you emanate a warmth that makes other people's nervous systems unwind in your presence without you saying a single word.
I love that.
Benjamin and Azria Becker, it's from their book called Becoming. I can't take credit, but when I think about what is really the ultimate goal for myself and what I want everybody to have in their life, but also the world. If you want to change the world, you have to change your world first. And so if there's a way to get to the point to where your world is so in alignment, internally, externally, your nervous system is in such peace and harmony that radiates to everyone around you. And this isn't woo-woo, this isn't bullshit.
No.
The heart alone emits an EMF field about 3 feet outside of our body. So when you walk into a room and like I feel some kind of way with you, there's actual measurable field there. If we can get to a point to where we are in such alignment where that is true for us, but it pushes out in a positive way to others, I'm changing my world and the world all at the same time.
I couldn't, I mean, again, you said it so beautifully. I feel like even when I started this work, I wasn't aware of how much internal suffering I had. And the way I looked at it was like, oh, there's so much pain in the world. I cannot even.
Which is true.
But it really was a reflection of how much unresolved suffering was in my body. And I realized if I want to at all be part of anything positive in this world, I need to work on this first, and then not have that be a trigger to me. And almost, and again, woo-woo, not woo-woo, but like it's almost an energy or a vibration where you can be like, even like sometimes when I watch the news, whether you're on this side or this side, and you're like, oh, you are so evil, like on the other side, like that to me is the same energy, And if I want to like rise above that and just be part of something more grounding and healing, like I first of all needed to work through that, worked through that suffering is inherent and really work through my suffering, and then get to that point where I'm like, okay, first and foremost, deal with this. Don't think you can fix anybody else before you master yourself. And also realize, like, for me, it's never like, okay, mastered, I'm done, I got it.
Right.
That's the journey.
It's mastery, the ongoing process of mastery.
Totally.
Well, that I think is a great segue into how can we move forward in life, Sarah, through all of what you've shared with us and how you view the world, your world and the world. How do you live a life ever forward? When you hear those words, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, to me, the thing that immediately comes to mind is when someone, like, there's this notion of, oh, I'm healed. I don't think, and there's a moment where you're healed, and after that, life is perfect. I think once you're on your healing journey, and this is what I want to live every day, is that there is a knowing and an okayness that you can hold it all. You know, that it's not black and white, it's every shade of gray.
Yeah.
And to be able to hold that like duality, you know, like nothing is good, nothing is bad, it just is. And I think the ups and downs of the human condition, like sometimes those lows, those really dark moments, like we pathologize them and we think there's something wrong, but like, you know, there's information there. And so I'm noticing the more I go on this healing journey, the more I feel everything. I feel the highs, I feel the lows, and then I'm still grounded in myself. I'm not swayed or pulled in these other directions. And that to me is moving ever forward, is understanding this is my base. This is like to be that fully grounded being and feel everything.
Ugh. That means a lot to me. There's never a right or wrong answer, but that is such a great reminder to me of why I do what I do and why I am continuously on this healing journey, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually.
Yeah.
Because when I go back to the root for me and my root of when I was not allowing myself to feel. I was avoiding at all costs feelings, anything that was unpleasant, painful, hard. And I think a lot of us do that because it's easier to go, I'm only going to be positive. I'm not even going to acknowledge these other things. There's a time and a place for that. And for me, the time and the place was like, I had to go back to being active duty Army and I didn't really have time. And it literally was not a safe environment for me to process that stuff. But that's another episode. But thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much. We'll do another episode solely on that.
It might be a billable hour for you. I don't know. We'll see. It'll be in your clinic and not my studio.
Amazing.
Well, where can everybody go to connect with you? We're going to have all of the information down in the show notes for everybody, of course.
There's a couple of projects I'm working on right now. So my clinic is Onea Health. So that's
ONEA.
ONEAhealth.com. And then another project I'm really excited, just with the psychedelic stuff, I find that the policy needs to change. There are these treatment modalities and we, because of legal reasons, can't access them. So someone like me who's a doctor that has no business being part of this needs to learn, needs to be part of the puzzle. So there's this ballot initiative we're actually working on in California. It'll be on the 2024 California ballot, where we want to create a funding agency for psychedelics. So it would create this $5 billion funding agency through the sale of California bonds, not increasing taxpayer dollars, because all of the money for research and not all of it, the majority of it is private philanthropy. And what we need is large-scale trials. We need to understand all the models, the indigenous model, the community model, the spiritual model. We need more education. We need access it would be for every Californian, regardless of their ability to pay. So we just need the money to be able to understand these medicines better. So it's called Treat California, treatcalifornia.org. So that's another project that's very near and dear to my heart. But those are the places that you can find me.
Well, merci, Sarah June.
Merci.
It was a pleasure to have you.
Merci, Chief.